Hi. Right. Thank you so much. First of all, I'm kind of nobody now, and I used to be important. I used to be the president of BERA. So, however, well, because of that, I'm really delighted that I got invited to chair this session. As you've heard, it was a privilege to be able to work with BERA and to rejoin WERA. It was a very exciting moment when it first happened, and this is really, for me, a fabulous culmination of lots of work by lots of people, which I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to lead. And what's really exciting me about this panel is its diversity in every respect. The subject is diverse, the topics are diverse, the people are diverse, so it's a wonderful way to start. I'm not going to introduce each individual speaker today, because I just wanted to say a few general words, and then you've no doubt all read the information on the app, which I'm finding even better than usual. So, and you know, I will encourage each of the speakers to speak for about 15 minutes. We've got a simple plan. We're going to start on my right, and we're going to, no, we're not going to, yes, we're going to work this way. That's right. It's stage right, stage left, isn't it, again? Yes, we're starting with you, and we'll work our way around. And then we'll have questions from the audience and comments and observations, which I will do my best to sort of keep us all on track. And one thing I would say about the questions, but by all means be thinking about them, given there are so many of you, if you wouldn't mind perhaps starting any question or comment with saying who you are, and also if you wouldn't mind keeping them relatively brief. Just occasionally, I'm sure we've all been guilty of sort of starting a lecture, which was meant to be a question. You know, I'm certainly occasionally guilty of that. But if we can keep them brief, then we can get as many questions as possible at the end. It also helps if you can, and you want to direct it at one of the panelists, please do say so. If it's a more general thing, then I think we'll let everyone have a turn just to say a few words if they wish. Just coming back to the kind words from Vari Beaton, I'm already worried about the late night tonight, because I am going to be at the gala. I'm not promising any dancing. And unfortunately, I have a symposium at 9 o'clock the day after on children's agency and the curriculum. So I'm beginning to worry slightly about it. But that's my problem. So without further ado, can I welcome you and start us off with the first talk.
Hello, I am Lee-Kyung Kim from South Korea, and I'm currently a professor and a dean of Jungwon University, one of the top 10 universities in Seoul, in Korea. And it's really honored to have this wonderful opportunity. But actually, I was supposed to be the third person to talk, right? But I think, because of my PowerPoint presentation, I think I was chosen to be the number one. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what an honor. And then instead of talking about myself, I tried to talk about Korea's case, because Korea is one of the most interesting and dynamic country. And then I think, you know, when I'm talking about my case, you guys might feel like, oh, that is not the only in case of Korea, but maybe my country might have the similar problem. So I proceed my talk, this, way. And then, let's start from the Korea's current situation of, student. This is the PISA data, and you already know that Korean kids, their achievement level quite high. Since Korea joined the OECD in 1996, after that we kind of, our 15-year-old took a test, math, science, and reading, and then our score is always, on the top. Of course, nowadays, Singapore is number one, and then before Singapore, Finland was number one. So Korean educators and the policymakers, they move all the way to Singapore and Finland, and they try to learn, from them. But actually, Korea is okay. But Korean people never satisfied with our result. And this is like, well-being, happiness level of Korean kids. Don't try to get this, just, listen to my explanation. Anyway, the point is that Korean kids, they are not happy in their lives. A lot of competition, and then Turkey is the bottom, and then Korea is the second from the bottom. Our kids, 15-year-olds, they are high achievers, but they are not happy. What's happening here? And then currently, we are kind of looking at the future, which is quickly changing, and Korea really come across big change. Number one, our fertility rate. People, their lifestyle is so different. They don't want to have kids anymore, and they are not married. A lot of my colleagues and my kids and my friends, they are single and enjoy their lives. And our population is decreasing. That's why our schools shut down, and then university, have a lot of problems because we don't have kids anymore. So we don't hire teachers anymore, and then worry about the future. Maybe Korea will disappear very soon, in 10, 20, 15 years. And then our country is getting multicultural, and then now we have about 5% of population is already multicultural. So Korean people, they don't have kids, but we have a lot of international people, so it become a multicultural society. This is also a challenge. What about private education? Our government, does a lot of things and all the things to reduce the, cost of private education. But every year it's increasing, and about 80% of our kids participate in private tutoring. Myself, I, all the way to my, during my middle school, high school, spend all my time studying. Our kids spend their time at the private tutoring institute very late. And then very big gap between the capital area and local area. So these are like challenges. And just, this is the size of Korea, how many schools and how many teachers. We have 45,000 teachers and 11,000 schools. And then in order to solve this problem, what's the problem of that kind of current trend? Big inequality, big gap, those poor kids and then rich kids and then inequality, and that is the biggest problem. What should we do? Last night I asked the ChatGPT, draw a picture in the schools at the center, and then all the other institutions work together to solve this problem, and then ChatGPT came out with this picture. So research institute, universities and parents and teachers and private institute, we have to work very hard to solve this problem. And what are the solutions? We try to take advantage of our AI. So it's a really big thing. Our Minister of Education, our President, and our teachers, we worry about it. Students, they should become now self-directed learner. What about teachers? They don't transmit knowledge anymore. They should be the learning designers. What about classroom? No more lectures. We try to change our classrooms with discussion and project-based learning and flipped learning, so on and so forth. If you go to the website, there are many kind of articles and then things about what AI can do for our education. It's going to be a panacea? I don't know. If you have an AI in the classroom, teachers are free. They don't have to grade. AI, does that, and then teachers can focus on other problems. What about, software adapted to individual student? What about, additional support? The AI can help those problem children, so on and so forth. It means that our teachers, we can spend more time to solve real problem of our problem children, and then maybe AI does all those, kind of chores. I don't know if it's going to really happen in the future. So, we call classroom revolution. This is the catchphrase of Korean government. We try to introduce AI textbook, and then it's going to be introduced from next year. We apply from certain subject next year, but by 2028, all the subject in Korea at the elementary level, secondary level, will be, kind of a digital textbook will be replaced our current, paper-based textbook. And then, in this case, teachers. My concern is the teachers. I am teacher educator, and then also my major is, educational policy and administration. Means that I'm a policy analyst. So then, teachers, high touch. We need high tech, but without high touch, these things cannot happen. We should work with AI, and the AI should be partners of, our educators. So AI can deal with high-tech digital textbook, all those infrastructure, but teachers, for adaptation and adjustment, even creative thinking, teachers are the one, people with high touch. then we need to train our teachers. Are we really ready? There are some students over here, some teacher educators, and also teacher trainers. And then, are we really ready for this? I'm really concerned about that. What about the challenges in our teacher education? Korean government introduced a new big project to change our school, our teacher training institute really AI ready. So our university applied for that, and we got the research fund. And from this semester, we have to change our whole curriculum. Should be AI based. And then, what about the technology in teacher education? We've been talking about technology for a long time from the education TV. However, it is not really easy. Are we really ready for our AI? You guys are really using AI comfortably? This is a challenge. What about second challenge? Maybe we might have some technology. However, do you apply your knowledge and skills to your teaching? Do you adapt yourself, those technologies in teaching teachers? I don't know. So, I still have some time, right? Yeah. Oh my goodness! Still, I have 6 minutes. I kind of.
You can speak for all of those 6 minutes if you want.
I'm really conscious because my major is the educational policy and administration. Really, time really matters. Tomorrow, my talk will be a trash, but today it's really valuable. What about third challenge? Teacher training curriculum. This is, AI. I'm talking about pre-service teacher education. What about, in-service, induction, even practicum? Can you believe in Korea, a top 5% from our labor market, they want to become teachers. So they are the cream of the cream. However, I told you, shrinking population, we don't hire that many teachers anymore. Then in that case, those top people, they cannot be hired as teachers because we shut down those quotas. And in this case, we train our teachers, you can become a teacher in the future. I cannot say that. Some, I think, I'm in the CISO, okay, you have to prepare your future job as for other career. And also, we train our pre-service teachers to become a teacher. I don't know what to do. So in this case, our curriculum is in between. And then, so I feel like induction is more important if they pass the employment test. The average age of our employment is about 29. Why? Why is it so late? Because they really want to become teachers, but no jobs available. So they take employment test again and again and again. So when they become 28, 29, finally they pass the test and they become a teacher. But by the time they're so tired, so they are ready to relax when they are, they assigned to school. This is the situation. What a challenge. So I told my government, instead of restructuring our pre-service education, you'd better strengthen our induction and in-service education. Anyway, that is also challenging. Finally, lack of partnership between private industry and also our university, teacher training institute and schools. And we ask our teacher trainers, what is your identity? And I cannot believe that. My identity is researcher, not teacher trainer, teacher educator. What about myself? Every day I'm dealing with my pre-service teachers. However, my identity is policy analyst and then, the kind of policy researcher. So I don't have the strong identity as a teacher trainer. So because of these things, we have a big gap. So we don't go to school anymore. So I asked my government, okay, for the teacher training institute, the professors, they have to go to school every, 6 years for their sabbatical. Instead of going to United Kingdom, United States for their research, they have to revisit their school and see what's happening in their school. So that is my concern. And my final remark is that even in the digital transformation of education, teachers really matter. I involved in OECD project, Teachers Matter, back in 2005. And then I was the national coordinator. And then I thought that really teachers are important. Without teachers, nothing happens. In this digital transformation, digital age, teachers still matter. and then I asked, ChatGPT, why don't you draw a picture, teachers at the center, and then everybody's working so hard, and then he showed this picture. At the beginning, at the center, ChatGPT showed a picture of a Western man, teaching a subject. So I asked ChatGPT again, okay, change the person at the center to a Asian, woman, and then he changed the picture. So I think, we have a really good tutor, really good kind of, assistant. However, without learning how to manage it, how to utilize this kind of cutting-edge technology, nothing happens. So I think, hopefully, Korea's case and Korea's effort and my own kind of sorrow can help you to deal with your own problem. Thank you very much.
I now feel lucky that I didn't make a slide, because otherwise I might be put as the first to talk. And thanks again to Yijian for doing this great presentation to get us started. Hello everyone, my name is Yu Weishi. I come from China originally, and currently I'm a social professor at the School of Education at the University of Nottingham. And also I'm on the BERA Council, and I'm one of the co-editors for the British Educational Research Journal. So in the next few days, if you're around and want to talk about getting published in BERT, feel free to talk to me. Because of Yijian's great presentation, now it's making me even more nervous. When I first received this invitation to be on the opening keynote panel, I wasn't really sure. That was a really big surprise. Why they invited me, and can I do it? I will really do a bad job and lose my faces to all the audiences. So I wasn't sure whether I should accept it. And then that night, I took a shower, and after that shower, I came back to my email desk and then replied, said, yes, I'm doing this open keynote. Do you know why? The reason is, during that shower, I start to think about the future of education, which is the topic of this opening. And I came up with so many topics and issues that I feel a little bit concerned about the future of education. And I also expect that in the next few months, when I take showers, I may worry about the future of education oftentimes. So my motivation to do this keynote is that it can't just be me who has to worry about the future of education when taking showers. I hope everyone here, at least tonight, you will worry a little bit about the future of education when you take showers. So that's why I'm here. So my approach is slightly different from Yijian. I'm going to share, I prepared 6 stories about myself, my lived experiences of education and how that links to the broader social, cultural, and political context that is shaping and influencing education. But I'm fully aware 15 minutes wouldn't allow me to share all those 6 stories. So I will try my best to do 2 or 3, and feel free to ask me the remaining stories during BERA if you're interested. The first story is about myself. So immediately when I'm asked to talk about the future of education, I start to think about the future of myself as a Chinese international academic currently working in the UK. The reason for that is because I've been working in UK higher education for 8 years now. After I did my PhD here, did my master's here, but still, I don't feel like it will be my final destination. And oftentimes I also got asked by people, where will you be next? Are you going to be in the UK forever? Are you going to be at the University of Nottingham forever? By the way, in the short term, I will not leave. I know my head of school is here today. So just to reassure you. But this is a very important question that always gets brought up in terms of the future of myself. And I think it's hard, where I would be going. The thing why it's been really difficult for me to feel, even myself, to feel like I will end up in the UK or in UK higher education. It's because of all the experiences that I have had even from day one. I remember when I was at my first university, day one, I had to go to an office, the financial office, to sort out some issues. And immediately, the moment I entered that room, colleagues from the financial office said, this is not for students, please go out, please. This is not for you, you shouldn't be coming here. That's my day one of starting my career in this country. And that has lasted throughout my 8 years being here, always been taken as an international student because how I look, and also not even in here, because oftentimes when we say, oh, of course it's about racism, why people think an Asian Chinese boy, of course he's a student. But then I realized it's not just about race. Even when I go to China with my colleagues, oftentimes they will ask, are they your supervisors? They look good. So a lot of times I take them for granted, all those kind of things, and also not to mention other aspects of our job. I've got complaints by students that because I gave them just a 40, which is a pass, in their assessments, and they will complain and ask other colleagues like, why is this Chinese give me 40, such a low grade? So this is the kind of everyday life living as an academic in the UK, which still is there. So we're talking about the future of education in a changing world, but there are actually a lot of things that haven't changed. That makes me wonder what should be next. Especially because even we are in a school of education, lots of our researchers are doing research related to equality, diversity, and inclusion. But still, even our everyday life in the school of education is like that. So UK, not sure. And I think about also going back to China maybe, but then because of my sexuality, it's also been very difficult. Last year, I went back to China because one university wanted to try to get me back to be the head of school in one particular department, which is really a privilege to being asked that. But then the reason it didn't happen in the end, I mean, I didn't want to go anyway. Volker, just make sure. The reason for that is because I was wearing an Apple Watch the day I was there doing a public talk to people, and that Apple Watch has a rainbow band, bracelet on that. So after that talk, I was told by someone I know in that panel, they entered a very big discussion about whether I'm gay, and if I am, they will never appoint me because of that. So that also makes me question that I may not be able to go back to work in China. So where I would be, that would be a question I haven't got answers yet. But my point here is my lived experience of higher education, both in the UK and China, still tells about the intersectional inequalities and the marginalization that despite all the efforts by many of our amazing colleagues in terms of research, in terms of training and things, that's still all there. So that's my first story in relation to my lived experiences in higher education itself. So that has led me to reflect a lot about my own subjectivity, and this also links to my personal research, my own research, which is about the subjectivity of teachers. So I work on teacher education, and then a few months ago, it was June, I think, the University of Nottingham, we hosted a launch of the Global Teachers Report. So my second story is about this, because in that report, I read one sentence that really makes me question the future of my research. That it mentioned, it's been talking about the shortage and the difficulties of retention of teachers globally. And in one of the sentences, it mentions how, as a measure to address the shortage of global teachers, we should try to encourage more men to become teachers, particularly in early childhood education and in primary education, because that's always balanced in terms of the binary constructions of gender. So in that report, it has one sentence saying men contribute differently to children's development and to children's education, with only one reference to UNESCO, which really makes me angry a little bit, because there's so many people in this room, myself, and out there doing research, challenging this kind of binary construction of gender, and also the assumed essentialist differences between men and women, and how that contributes to education. But this very important global teachers report didn't really recognize that, but only uncritically say we need more men, and that's because it helps to contribute to children's education in a holistic way. So that makes me worry as well, like how when we are having a shortage in teachers, and if we are going towards a way of trying to get people into education, who are those people that are doing education and are teaching the future of our children? And not just the gender, but also race and many other aspects. And also because of the shortage in many countries, for example, in Australia, there's also a big shortage. And one phenomenon as a result of that is there are lots of teachers migrating from other countries to Australia, partly because of the policy there, but also because of other reasons that has making it more internationally diverse. I mean, it has been diverse already. And also like China, although globally we're talking about global shortage, but actually China is suffering from a decline in birth rates, and that leads to the closure of many kindergartens at the moment. So we're not in shortage of teachers somehow, and that will hit primary education, secondary education very soon, and then across the different sectors. So I guess many Chinese will go to Australia as well to become teachers. So that makes me wondering, like, who will become teachers, and what will their subjectivity as an individual, having experienced different cultures, different aspects of their life, how will they bring those into their work, into their interactions with teaching, into their interactions with children? So that is my second thinking and question. Again, no answers to that, but I would like colleagues to have a think about, like, who become teachers in the future and how their own teacher subjectivities will come into the way they teach and the way they interact with children. That's my second story. And the third story is also somehow linked. I'm not sure if I've got enough. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Okay, I will be very quick. This third one is about children, of course. The other part of my research links to children's participation. So we do a lot of research that is directly research with children and listen to their perspectives and voices about all different aspects of education, such as climate change, such as play, such as gender. So one thing that I come across in this process of doing so many projects related to children's participations, I realize both in the UK context, in Chinese context, and in many other international contexts where my collaborators work together with us, is that we find it so difficult to engage with children and families from relatively disadvantaged backgrounds. A lot of those papers and projects currently out there in relation to children's participation, oftentimes they build upon talking to children from relatively privileged backgrounds. And when I do like teacher training with Chinese teachers, they get so excited about this, like, oh, we can listen to children, but always underlying that is the assumption that children are all the same, and there's an underlying binary again in terms of children versus adults. So we need to listen to children's voices, because a lot of the teachers I work with, they will say, because their perspectives are different from adults, again essentializing the perspective. So we've tried really hard in many ways, which I won't go into details, but to really listen to children's voices from disadvantaged backgrounds, from low-income families in this country's context, or from children with disabilities and children in the global south, but it's been so challenging and difficult. So my third thing in terms of my lived experience of the research is also to make colleagues and people aware of don't get too excited about children's participation, children's voices, because there's also a danger here, I feel, that reproduces some of the marginalization and inequalities when certain children's perspectives are oftentimes heard, but a lot of others are not. And that's something I've been trying to work hard on. But again, I don't have a definite answers to, and I really hope there will be chance to discuss all those things with all of you in the next 4 days. And I have other 3 stories if you want to listen. Please come to me after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I was extremely excited when I saw this topic, the future of education in a changing world, as the lens through which I work is that of resilience. And resilience from a process orientation sees disruption to a system as the starting point to predict negative outcomes we would not wish, in this case for education. And resilience says what happens in an ecosystem, socio-ecologically, to prevent this negative outcome and circumvent it towards an unpredicted, unexpected positive outcome. So in this specific session, the disruption to the system, the challenging times, could include war and conflict. It could include displaced people, high numbers of children in distress, extreme inequality globally, high diversity, which is not celebrated but seen as a barrier or challenge. And we can go on with legions of additional challenges that disrupts the system and says, how on earth will we get to the positive outcome that we wish for in education? I like the work of epidemiologists Wilkinson and Paquette, who talk about positive outcomes for life in terms of both subjective and objective health and well-being outcomes, which would include education. Here, they found in large-scale studies across the world that what predicts a positive outcome for health and well-being across the lifespan would mean 3 basic variables, and all of these relate to education. The first is to have a functional childhood. So if we in this ecosystem can do something to mobilize functional childhood services, access, equity to healthcare, to education, to transport, to infrastructure, that would already be a predictor for positive education outcomes. The second would be high self-esteem. So for children to feel good about who they are, where they come from, and have aspirations for where they want to go. The same holds for teachers, to have teachers who feel good about who they are, good about what they can do, confident that they can teach, and to be prepared in the classroom. The third one is relational. That across the lifespan, if you can draw on strong relationships that matter and are significant to you, that it predicts positive health and well-being outcomes across the lifespan. The particular question here is, what do we do given these challenging times? And it's not new. Challenging times and changing times have been part of human existence. With the Anthropocene, there are added challenges with climate. And if we look at what climatologists says, even this is not new. And even this was predicted. It's just accelerated. Sustainability science argues that if we look towards partnerships, we would be able to harness the resources that are available to drive towards the unpredicted positive outcomes. And that is thoroughly exciting because people are at the center. I love the even the avatar in a personal or in a human form being at the center of education. But teachers can collaborate. People in the education system are drawn to social dimensions of learning and becoming, whether you're at policy level, whether you're in the classroom. So how can we leverage partnerships to ensure unpredicted positive outcomes in education? And if you think ecosystemically, we can do this from the classroom system up to a transdisciplinary science space. There are so many wonderful publications of how teachers in classrooms use class discussion to engage children in partnership to learn. How school communities that may be in high-risk spaces partner with resources and assets around the community to be sure that children who arrive at school hungry can have food. Great partnerships between policymakers and researchers means that evidence can matter at policy level and at implementation level. This space where we can collaborate and share knowledge matters. The way that we share evidence in publications, but also during conferences, matters and can push the boundaries and help us towards the wished for positive outcomes. The challenges we face also mean that we can't work in silos as in terms of education as a science, that we need to think in transdisciplinary ways. So if you work on the urban-rural continuum with schools in remote spaces, it matters to also work with people in ecosystem services and to think of people who can look at the livelihood generation in rural spaces, which would matter for education and the outcomes in those spaces. SDG 17 has wonderful, wonderful ideas on how partnerships can be at the heart of knowledge generation for social impact and change. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's my honor to be here, and I really want to thank you all for being here with us and for my esteemed colleagues and to BERA and WERA. My name is Andrea English, and I'm at the University of Edinburgh. And today I want to talk to you actually about something quite specific and then show you how expansive it really is, and that is the need to value teacher listening in education. Schools and curricula often and tend to narrow teachers' attention towards students' right answers. And this can hinder the opportunities teachers could have to listen to the meaningful thinking that students are doing in classrooms every day. So, what's at stake here? If we lose sight of the powerful listening that teachers are doing, we also lose sight of this meaningful learning, and actually we make it impossible to engender in classrooms, and I want to talk to you about why. So I want to tell you a story of a very inspirational teacher that I had the privilege to work with and learn from on a project that my colleagues, two dear collaborators, Kirsty Tyson and Allison Hintz, have been working on to understand how teachers listen during mathematical discussions with pupils in primary schools in the US and Scotland. And in that project, we met Miss Moreau, I'll call her for the purposes of this talk. And I'd like to characterize Miss Moreau's classroom as one where she found creative ways to help students through their thinking processes to really express deep and rich thinking in mathematics. And she not only just, supported them problem solving, as we always think is kind of the mode of child-centered education, but she actually dug into the situations and helped them find problems and created situations where things could go awry, in her words. So in one of the situations that we got to observe, the students were at activity tables. They were about 10 or 11 years old, and they were testing different objects and trying to figure out, how do I measure the weight of these objects? So they moved around to the tables, and at one of the tables they were trying to weigh a chair on an ordinary household floor scale. And so after these activities, the teacher went around, seeing what they were doing, listening to what they were doing. And after these activities, she asked them, please reflect and write down what went awry in your group and what did you try next? What didn't work? And after they had some time to reflect on this, she had a targeted discussion on, please tell me, in the case of the chair, for example, what didn't work when you were trying to weigh the chair. So as you can imagine, and our school system supports this effort that students were making to immediately give the right answer. We found the solution, you know, and they were very eager to raise their hand and proud, as they should be. But the teacher gently pushed back and said, wait, let's figure out how we got there. Let's look at what went awry, what didn't work. When you were measuring the weight of the chair. So, you know, one student, Jenny, raises her hand. Okay, so what we did is we put the chair on the scale because we were thinking we could weigh each leg, but the chair didn't fit. And so the teacher said, oh yes, I remember coming over to your group and you were trying to weigh the chair. And you said to me, you know, we're trying to measure the weight of each leg. And Jenny said, yes, that's exactly right. So we were trying to measure the weight of each leg and times it by 4. Well, that makes sense. So the teacher said, and did that work? No. They went on, you know, some children had tried to balance the chair sideways and these kinds of things. So among all of these discussions, what was happening was the teacher was directing and guiding their threads of thinking towards opening up these processes and how did they think together. And they were expressing how they thought together, what ideas worked, what ideas didn't work, how they revised their thinking, how they had to rethink it, and they became frustrated and confused. And the conversation opened up sometimes even more uncertainties that they were still working through. So in an interview, we asked Ms. Moreau about her approach and how she engaged the students in mathematical discussion. And she said one of the sort of questions that is always in the back of her head is, how do I hear each and every child, even those that may be silent? So this was very, very meaningful, and I think it's representative of many teachers and what they're doing in classrooms every day. And we can hear in these children's voices that she enabled through the way that she asked questions to open up the conversation for the teacher herself and the other students to listen and hear each other. Gives us the sound of meaningful learning, if we can put it that way. But something that pervades our mind as a society, I think it's probably true maybe of everyone in this room, at least it's true of me, that there's this common image that has been fed to us that the teacher is the one who talks. The teacher is the one who stands up, transmits the important knowledge, and the students have to listen. So we've valued student listening for a long time. And we've valued student silence for a long time. And we can see this so much so that classrooms historically have been designed with all of the rows of seats and chairs facing the teacher as the one who's talking. Thinkers like John Dewey, Paulo Freire have reminded us of the problems of this situation and how the distinctive voices of so many children have been marginalized and silenced in this situation. Also, notably, we know that this situation where the teacher's the one talking and the students are listening only, primarily, except when they have the right answer, goes against and undercuts much of what we know about how humans learn. So there's abundant evidence about thinking aloud. When students think aloud through their ideas, when they express their ideas and their threads of thinking, this creates meaningful learning processes, meaningful critical learning processes. And we also know, and it's becoming more and more evident, that when students do this thinking aloud, they can start to identify the uncertainties in their sense-making, the confusions, and that identification of those significant moments of learning deepens their understanding of a subject. So in mathematics education, these types of meaningful learning processes are getting codified into policy in the US and Scotland. We know that they're important. So we've paid attention to the importance of student talk, but have we really paid attention to the other side of this relationship? Do we really value teacher listening? So the difficulty with the topic of teacher listening is that we know that teachers listen in complex ways. However, it's an invisible facet of their practice. It easily goes unnoticed, and it's largely understudied in research and underrepresented in policy. So, but if we think about our everyday lives as teachers, I'm sure many teachers here or people that work with teachers, we know that teachers understand the difference, not only, and need significant knowledge, not only in the subject matter, but also in the understanding of each human being in their classroom and what that person knowledge has, what abilities they may have, how they're growing, how they're learning. And that knowledge of each person is significant to their listening as well, not just the subject matter knowledge. For example, a teacher knows that the hesitation of a student who's normally confident in mathematics, who's now finding difficulty sort of expressing their idea, can be an important and an okay sort of challenge that needs a certain kind of adjustment, perhaps with a group, thinking through it. But that hesitation and difficulty in finding words means something different to a teacher when it's coming from a student who's maybe new to the school or who's having trouble at home. And so what we're finding is that teachers switch their listening when they understand the meaning of what a student is saying in different ways. And so all of this is happening. But what needs to happen is we need to make teacher listening visible and valued. And when we do that, we can see how valuable it really is. So for about 20 years, I've been working on the ideas and processes around how humans learn to think. And in that, how teachers can support that critical and rich thinking processes that we all know is important for problem solving, for dealing with the uncertainties of our society. And teacher listening is critical to that. More importantly, I've been working alongside teachers, pre-service and in-service teachers in teacher education, professional learning, and empirical contexts, and including in this project with my collaborators where we met Ms. Moreau. And we are, and in these contexts, we are finding that, teacher listening is complex and nuanced, and how can we, and we're aiming to make that visible. And what we're learning is that this complex and nuanced work of teachers affords students incredible opportunities to have their own voice, their knowledge, their experiences, their contributions, their draft ideas be heard by others. They are having the opportunity to listen to others and revise their own thinking, to listen to their peers and revise their own thinking. And they're having the opportunity to feel heard. And so we know these moments are crucial for meaningful learning experiences. And we also know that these kinds of experiences are significant and vital for building the kinds of relationships that will help us achieve democratic and ethical futures. So my contention is that our future depends on making teacher listening valued and visible, and so that we can see how valuable it really is for all students' meaningful learning processes. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm overwhelmed by this incredible display, if you like, the storytelling. The range of topics is extraordinary. The depth of knowledge has been extraordinary. But what I think is very special is if you put 4 eminent educationalists in a panel like this, you get a very special set of ideas that are special to educationists. And it's something, it's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, is that we should be proud of the fact that educationists and education researchers and practitioners and policymakers offer something unique and special, and there's decades of work to do on refining what that special thing is. But I think this panel has so beautifully exemplified this that my head was just fizzing. I mean, I saw the PISA charts and I'm thinking, yes, I've been delving around in there. That was fascinating. Your storytelling, collaboration, and the way we talk to children, the way we talk to students, there's almost nothing more important. So thank you all so much. Now, everyone here, I hope you're feeling confident to put your hand up, and if you want to ask a question or you'd like to make an observation. Ros, yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Such an interesting panel. Yue, I don't know what you're thinking in the shower. It's certainly not what I think. My name's Ros McClellan. I'm at the University of Cambridge. I'm also the publications chair, so please do come to our session on Wednesday morning if you want to know more about our publications and journals. My question actually particularly is for Liesl. I totally agree about the ecosystem, the importance of collaboration, particularly with policymakers. But I know in the UK we find it quite difficult to collaborate with our policymakers. So I'm wondering if your work can cast some helpful inspirations or tips for us in terms of making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. I think, like all relationships, and I know of many colleagues in the UK who've forged strong relationships over time, also with policymakers. It begins probably with that first connect and trust, and relationships take time to develop. So for it to be instrumental and impactful, a lot of time would need to be spent in building and forging those relationships. I think for many people here who have relationships with policymakers and with government, it would start with a narrative, with a story of how at a space you met somebody who was like-minded and whose job was in government, as yours is in research, and how a mutual interest in wanting to serve society then leads to efforts to use evidence, to generate evidence, sometimes if you're lucky, with policymakers, and then to see that implemented. That is the ideal. I don't think it's scalable because I think it's driven by personal agency and connections. I do not come from a country where there are platforms to inculcate research and policy integration in a systematic, coordinated way. I think it's much more individually driven. I do think the spaces where it happens works really well. I've also enjoyed how the IEA, who does the Pearls and Tim's studies, in a country such as South Africa, has been really instrumental in assisting the dialogue between researchers and government and school systems to make evidence matter with quick uptake and implementation. Yeah, but at the heart of it would be probably people, I would guess, who have a joint agenda and want to make it work.
Thank you. I'm hoping that we may get other queries, questions, observations. There's, yes, a lady here, gentleman there, lady there. Right, okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. There's 4, and that'll probably take us through to 11:30. So thank you so much for... Yes.
Is this on? Yeah. Hello. So Andrea English, I have a question for you. Thank you very much for your very interesting case study, in a way, or case studies. I was really interested to find out, about teacher listening, because I've heard a lot about dialogic teaching. Perhaps you're familiar with that, with Robin Alexander's work and Neil Mercer. I'm not sure if they're here, but I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on the differences between perhaps dialogic teaching and dialogic learning and teacher listening, and how that might be different. The reason why I ask is I've also done mathematics research and had that kind of experience when you open up this kind of dialogue between the teachers and the students. And I've also seen a similar thing, that the students rush to pleasing the teacher, of like, oh, we got the right answer. But actually, you know, if the teacher encourages or prompts a little bit more exploration of that frustration, then it really opens up that safe space for the students to talk about their frustrations and specifically identify their mistakes without feeling reprimanded. So it's a two-part question, I guess.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question. Is this on? Yes, okay. And thank you for sharing that story. I think there's sort of two parts to my answer. There's the body of research that says, theoretical and empirical research that says, you know, we need to, in order to learn, in order to reflect and have sort of thinking that is of a kind of inquiry nature, we need to have these experiences that make us fall into doubt. So naturally, frustration occurs because we don't want to be in doubt, generally as humans. And so we start to think about that. So I think that's one aspect of the research that's really important to your question, and I'll tell you why. The other side is, yes, there's an enormous body of research on dialogic teaching and its importance, and I think it has done, you know, that's my background as well, and I think it's done excellent work in sort of getting us to the place where we're changing from the monologue of the teacher just talking. And, you know, classroom structures have changed a bit. Sometimes we're putting kids into groups and young people into groups, even in higher education. There's group work going on. And so we're starting to open up that space, but oftentimes in these bodies of research, it's mentioned that the teacher listens and they need to listen. But how they're listening is not explored enough, in my opinion. So the research on teacher listening is really just aiming to make visible and draw out the listening that happens and its complexity that adds to the body of research of dialogic teaching and demonstrates why it is so important. But it's not just two logics coming together, countering each other. It's one, when someone's talking, especially a young person or a student, if there's no one listening, how can we sort of pull apart the meaning of that and help that person feel heard just as much, you know, thinking about educational situations as a microcosm of society, we can't just talk when no one's listening. However, we often do. But, you know, the idea is that let's value the other side of that relationship. So it's really just emphasizing another aspect of that research. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much for the question. I think we're going over here. We have about 3 minutes left, so...
I'll try to be quick. So, hello, I'm Mark Niesemann from the International Baccalaureate. Dr. English, I was really interested by your case study as well. To me, it speaks about how knowledge is developed in children. Schema, how do you understand a child's schema? How do you really understand where their thinking is? Enter that exchange with them. But to connect the dots of it, Dr. Kim, when you talked about AI, you highlight that AI as a tool can be particularly useful in knowledge development. But then, to understand how knowledge is developed through teacher listening, and I was particularly struck by the picture you showed, because Dr. English said, oh, classrooms are set up in rows, and that's historically where it's teacher didactic. That picture was what you had. You had lots of rows. So how does teacher listening fit in with an AI future where the interactions are going to get more muddy? So I'm trying to connect some dots.
I'm getting some messages to say that we have indeed got to 11:45, so I'll just relax a bit now. I mean, do you want to have a go on this first, as you haven't had a chance to? So I'll stop hassling you.
All right. Thank you very much for asking that question. Actually, listening, very, very important. Okay, why don't you stop and check your posture? Okay, check your posture. If you are leaning forward or backward, if you are leaning forward, it means that you are listening. But if you are leaning backward, it means that you are not listening. You are doing something else. Why? Because people listen 3 times more than people can speak. So I think this is a really important topic, and listening really needs skills. And actually, when I was offering a course, leadership to our undergrad, and then I taught the importance of listening, because listening can control the situation, not the speakers. Because, since, why I was checking my timer, because, Dominic Dom was kind of shooting a laser to me. And I felt like, oh my goodness. He was listening really, really hard. But I got the message, oh my goodness, my time's almost up, so I'd better wrap up. And so actually, you controlled me, to speak.
I deny this. You are interpreting my body language in a particular way.
That's right.
I was just enjoying your talk.
Body language, very, very important, and culturally really different, because this is the Western style body language, but Korean style body language is different, right? When they are listening, if they make an eye contact too hard, it means that I'm doing something wrong. So anyway, so if I relate this situation to the AI and then listening, I think, hopefully, AI can do some chores, and then we can spend, especially Korean teachers. Last year I was conducting a research commissioned by our Ministry of Education and also our teacher union together to reduce teachers' chore, teachers' administrative duties. And this is going to be the topic that I'm going to present on Wednesday, the result of my research. And then because we are very serious, teachers are spending too many hours and too much time to doing something else. They don't have time to listen to kids. They don't have time to really care about the teaching and learning, and then take a look in eye contact and then see what they are doing, what they are thinking, and if they are learning, not just take a look at the exam result. Do they get the right answers for the exam? So that's why we see a little bit of possibility from the AI. Maybe AI can adopt the children's learning. We are using a lot of software at this moment, and then teachers can do something else. They can listen, especially those children who have problem, and drill and practice. Actually, AI can provide a lot of drill and practice things, and then they can focus, because different students have different kind of errors and human errors, and then so I think this is time for teachers to listen and really engage in teaching and learning. So I think in that kind of aspect we are together.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you've sort of put a positive on the AI future. So I have a kind of negative side to that as well to add, just to answer your question. I've been involved in a project with informatics colleagues where we are trying to have a methodology where we can keep understanding remote learning and how students are struggling and finding those important moments of confusion, even though we might not see them in real time. And the reason for that is because my sense is, in particular with the rapid transition to online learning, and there's nothing wrong with online learning per se, but with the rapid transition and the movement towards online learning and the additional movement towards AI, there has been an undercurrent that we can replace the teacher with a robot. So I think if we think about, a chat bot analyzing a student's expression of thinking, and they're picking out certain words that might be programmed to be significant, There's something very different about that for students, I would say, and also anecdotally for the students that I've spoken to about this, than feeling heard and sort of engaged by a real human teacher with the knowledge and the care, to understand where they're coming from, to kind of know how to guide them, what knowledge what resources do they need. So I think that for me, the AI future could be a positive one if it's supporting teachers in the way that you've described and giving them more opportunities to listen to those meaningful moments. But my worry is that it's tending towards the idea that teachers, we don't really need them, do we? We could use AI instead. So I think that's a real concern that we should be worried about.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for those answers. I'm looking at this, and if I'm right, there are people asking questions from the other room. So before I move, I think it was yes, can I move to you, the lady there, just after I've asked one of these questions, if you don't mind. So this one is for you, Wei. A question from Jane Waters-Davies. How might we work to increase children's participation in schools without reproduction of inequalities?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
It's an easy one for you.
Very easy.
Just a couple of minutes.
I have to say we're expecting a lot from teachers. Immediately, I think is again like listening, and in many cultures, I think awareness is the first step, because there's always this power relations and this socially constructed power dynamic that is always the teachers who have the authority. So this kind of very basic information needs to be made aware through, for example, pre-service and in-service teacher training in the first place to make it out there for teachers to start thinking about this in the first place. Because in many, especially our Asian cultures, many of our teachers are not even aware of this necessity to listen to children. So I think that would be a quick starting point, and then that will lead to many other complicated issues later, but I won't be able to finish that in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant answer, thank you. The lady here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Lucy Wakiaga. I'm from the African Population and Health Research Center in Nairobi, Kenya. My question is directed to Andrea. When I was hearing you talking about a teacher's voice, I'm thinking about, I wanted to go to the other end of it, in terms of, because when you were sharing, I was feeling like, oh, this sounds like a very, maybe ideal situation, if I can call it that. But I would also want to hear from you, what about those situations where you have teachers dealing with very bread and butter issues? So for example, systems that don't appreciate teachers, they underpay them, they overwork them, they don't think about classroom sizes for the teachers, they reform curriculum systems without funding the system, and then these are the teachers who, coupled with difficult economic times, have to go into these ballooned classrooms and teach. And really, we want to see improved learning outcomes, because at the end of the day, there's performance contracting, and if they don't meet those expectations, then they are going to be fired. So how do you then, how would a teacher in such a situation be able to bring out her voice, because already she's already so overworked, underpaid, stressed? We are talking about mental issues for teachers. We even have situations where teachers are committing suicide because they just cannot function in these kinds of environments. So maybe from a broader macro level, how do we then engage with policy makers and decision makers to be able to improve these teaching environments, so then we can actually tap onto the good work that you are doing? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. I mean, your question is profound, and I have to say I don't have an answer. But I guess my attempt at an answer would be, you know, those things need to change, and we can't continue on that path to put teachers and learners in those kinds of situations. So what can we do? As a philosopher, I think we have to change our values. So the value of performance testing, accountability on outcomes is, you know, leading to these kinds of tragedies, in my opinion. So I think that's one thing. I only hope that teachers are finding, against all odds, and I think there's cases where they are, and I've read and talked to colleagues doing empirical work, helping, you know, in particular, marginalized communities, doing this work where teachers are finding little gaps where they can listen and they can have that kind of profound, life-changing moment with one child and then another and then another. And it's very slow, and I guess that's all I have to say. But I thank you for your question. Thank you so much. Maybe there's others.
Thank you. Again, another query from, this one's from Joe Billington, and it's a question for you, Liesl. Please, could you repeat details of the study which outlines the variables for lifelong well-being? I'd like to read it.
Yeah, do read it. The authors are Wilkinson and Paquette. The book is called The Spirit Level, Why Equality is Better for Everyone. And actually, part of that builds on the question that you asked and that Angela addressed. And that is that in many regions in the world, it won't change. Classrooms will continue to balloon. Resources mean that there are too few teachers. There are too few classrooms. There are many children who need to come to school. They come to school hungry. They come to school eager to learn, and they need support. And teachers cope with that every day. There's a body of knowledge on teacher resilience that speaks to this. There's wonderful scholars in the UK also working on that. And teachers show up every day. In one study we had, we went to a school close to the Swaziland border, and there was a male teacher, a maths teacher, who showed up every year to teach. He had not received a salary for the whole year because there was a mix-up. His identity number was taken by somebody else who got his salary. But this teacher went to the school every day to teach. The community carried him. They made sure that he had transport to school, that his family had food every day. And there are many such instances of teachers persevering and who have partnerships and support to prevent burnout, enable quality education, and secure job fulfillment. And I think those studies are really, really interesting because in emerging economy countries, this is not outlier circumstances. This is everyday life.
If I may just briefly, before we have what I think will have to be the final question, there are some profound things here about context for education worldwide. I've had the privilege in working in a school in an informal settlement just outside Dar es Salaam many years ago. It truly shook me to my core, the whole experience, and things like, you know, no electricity, no windows even, no water, no toilets, and yet teaching and learning was happening, and we were there to try and help. And the oral language was almost all they had, and it was you know, I felt I learnt a lot, and that's the only way it could be, really. But also it makes me think, Elaine Alterholter has contributed a chapter to the BERA Sage Handbook of Evidence-Based Practice and Policy, which I'm proud to say is now in production. over 100 authors, 50-odd chapters. You'll hear more about this in the coming months, but she makes the point that even in terms of what we might think as a technical matter of systematic reviewing, I mean the technical form of that and meta-analysis, there are a whole set of assumptions, Western assumptions, built into those methodologies that have to be unpicked and understood. But that's enough from me. We have a final question.
Yeah, thank you. It's Chuck Whitehead, visiting professor of education at the University of Cumbria, Northwest University, South Africa, and Ningxia Teachers University in China. I'm just fascinated by the energy and enthusiasm of each of your presentations. And I'm curious about how you see the responsibility of an educational researcher, about whether you see that within your stories they should include an explanation of your educational influence in your own learning and the learning of someone else, either a student, or a colleague. So if you could focus on that, because in each of your narratives, which were exciting, enthusiastic, I actually felt that omission of your own justification of your educational influence in the learning of anybody with values of human flourishing. So, thank you.
Shall we work round? If you'd like to go first.
Yeah, very relevant and excellent question. As a policy researcher, I really do appreciate your question because, if I want to really change the world, really change the education, I should become the president of, Korea, or
We'll support you.
Yeah. Because our president is so concerned about education and our minister of education really listened to him. So either president or minister of education, but unfortunately, I'm here at the university as a teacher, educator, and then also policy researcher. So one way I see myself is that my research is very important. As far as I communicate with the government, those policymakers who have the power, of course I can produce excellent evidence. But if they don't buy my idea, it's just a piece of papers. But if they listen to me, so, fortunately, when I conducted a research about our teachers' administrative duties, they listened to me. I gave this presentation in front of the minister and in front of the people, and they knew our government body. And then they listened this very seriously, and then they announced it. So some of them now put into practice. So I think, we have to take a look at our responsibility as a researcher, as a policymaker, as a teacher educator, and then communicate all the time. Then sometimes my idea become a policy, but sometimes it's just a waste of time. But for me, it's really valuable. It's valuable because in 5 years later, somebody saw my published paper, and they say, oh, this is a great idea because the regime changes and people changes. So this is my answer to your question. Thank you.
Thanks. For me, I always tell myself, I'm inspired by my own stories in terms of how I always think as a social scientist and as educational researcher, I live in my theories. So a lot of the things I agree to and how I make sense of the theories I use is always built upon the way I myself has been going through all those things. I'm very into, for example, theories in terms of gender intersectionality because of the story I just told and all the other aspects of my life. That's how the marginalization because of how I perform as a Chinese boy in my school time and even nowadays has affected me. That's how I think I do my research in the same way that would really inspire others and also provide evidence that there are gendered norms in our everyday life, in the way teachers interact with children, in the way children interact with each other, that reproduces some of those. So that's one important part for me, is like how, as an education researcher, I think it is important to live in my theory and to perform and behave in a way that is really using that to apply to real life practices, starting from myself. That's one aspect. And then the other aspect is also acknowledging that and transparentizing that in the process of the research. So there's a lot of talk about researcher bias in positivist research and also in other research camps. But for me, we always talk a lot about researcher subjectivity. It's like how from the very first day we came up with this project, the motivations behind that may have something to do with who you are until the last and it might not be an ending point, but until the paper is written up or a report is out there, there's also a way like how you choose to tell that story about this project is also your subjectivity, your gender, your ethnicity, your experiences all come into that. So one important part in my research, and I always make sure this is also to my students, is the researcher subjectivity being reflected in the research process. And finally, it's also coming into my teaching as an educationalist in a university, whereas many of our students are also going to be teachers, going to be educators in the future. So one thing that is also important is we value who they are and how they come to this educational institution to take on this particular course. So an important part of that is also a sharing of experiences among the students, which I see as a very important part of the knowledge development and construction in the teaching process. So this is a really important question. I think it comes into my own life, my research, and my teaching as such. Thank you.
We did a study with the Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund in a couple of Southern African countries, and we wanted to understand how well-being was conceptualized from an Afrocentric lens. And we had these interesting formulations of items to prompt a response. And in the end, we realized we just used the blackboard in classrooms, and we wrote, at the end of the day, if you go to bed at night and you close your eyes, how do you know this was a good day? And for me, I know it was a good day if the evidence that I co-generate with others can make a difference in society. So whatever we do in our Center for Research is to try to have spaces where we can share evidence in communicable ways, accessible ways, science communication, not just in publications, but in briefs, in community forums, over WhatsApp groups, in short sound bites, so that people see, this matters, we can do this, and it's low threshold and it can be used immediately.
I'll just be brief. I appreciate your question. I think the idea of collaboration is important to methodology, and that's what I'm understanding you to be asking about is methodology. For us in the project I talked about, you can read about that in a paper called Pedagogical Listening in the journal Teachers and Teaching from last year. But in particular, what I think was important in our study that we found important after doing it was recall interviews with the teachers where they could watch themselves back in particular episodes and talk us through what they were thinking so that we weren't making assumptions completely about how they were engaging the students. And so those recall interviews, we enabled them to correct our views, to inform our views. And so I think that that's one aspect of significance to how we modified any kind of bias. But at the same time, I've always been interested in sort of making invisible processes visible, student thinking, teacher listening, and other things. So that value is going to come into the research, and I'm happy to name that value. And I think I appreciate your question and asking us to name that. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I've felt privileged really to sit and listen to you. I think also the good-natured exchanges promise so well as a model for what we'll have hopefully throughout the conference. So I've learned some really profound things, but I've also learned something very basic. As a chair, I should know what time a session ends. I believe actually it ends at 12, is this right? Yes. But no harm, I guess, in allowing a little bit more networking. People might want to come up to the stage and talk to our speakers in that way. So I'm not ashamed of maybe finishing a few minutes early, and it could even be the first time it's ever happened at a BERA conference.